certainly on the Christian calendar, without question. We've seen him sapped of his energy down through the years, but here in front of St. Peter's Square and St. Peter's Basilica, the premier church of Roman Catholic Christendom, named for his disciple Peter, who was also the first pope, we see, as Koki says, the great commemoration of why much of the world is celebrating this millennium this evening.
Peter, you know, this spot where St. Peter's is has been a place of worship since well before Christianity. It's one of those spots that human beings have congregated on and worshiped deities from time out of mind. And it seems to continue to attract people in that way, that as a sacred spot throughout the generations.
Thank you, Koki. That's the Pope and the Papal Apartments. Now let's go back to Paris for their grand finale of their midnight celebration.
It started at the bottom and then just kept enveloping it in all different colors, probably the most spectacular fireworks we've seen yet. And then the whole of the Eiffel Tower was lit by 20,000 bulbs and Christmas lights, so that the entire city is reflected in this glorious landmark. And you know, Peter, this is a great night for Paris. As you pointed out earlier, they've had some very difficult times, occupied by the Germans. 2 world wars fought in this country, and now it is a very happy and exciting time. On the Champs-Élysées, which is closed off to cars, there are Ferris wheels that are running for the first time, 11 of them, each one with a different scene, from acrobats to internet to performers. All of the trees are lit, all of the bridges are lit, Peter. It is a city absolutely ablaze, and if we sound excited, it's because it's just been, in terms of a celebration, something glorious to see. Paris outdid itself.
Thanks, Barbara. I apologize for interrupting. We could not complete this midnight without going to Madrid, which isn't perhaps quite the city with a sense of drama that Paris and Rome has too, but at the Puerta del Sol, in the very center of the old city, the official celebration of midnight in Madrid. In the Plaza Mayor, thousands of Spaniards have come together to remind themselves of where they have been in this century. And they've been a lot of places and made a fabulously great number of contributions to history. And they now, and we'll talk to them before the evening is over, will wish to share their wishes for the new millennium as well. Our coverage of ABC 2000's Millennium around the world will continue in just a moment.
Live from around the world, a celebration of the millennium. This is ABC 2000. With Peter Jennings at ABC 2000 headquarters in Times Square, Barbara Walters in Paris, Diane Sawyer in New York, Charles Gibson in London, Koki Roberts in Rome, Elizabeth Vargas in Sydney, Connie Chung in Las Vegas, Deborah Roberts in Orlando, Jack Ford in Times Square, Carol Simpson in Chicago, and Sam Donaldson at the Y2K Command Center in Washington. With our correspondents spanning the globe in Shanghai, Bombay, Bethlehem, Moscow, Havana, Rio de Janeiro, and across the U.S., reports from Miami, New Orleans, Tucson, Los Angeles, San Francisco. And in New York, Dick Clark counting down to the new year in Times Square. Special Millennium performances by Billy Joel, Elton John, Enrique Iglesias, Faith Hill, NSYNC, Fish, The Bee Gees, Aerosmith, Blondie, Bonnie Raitt, Neil Diamond, Harry Connick Jr., Kenny G, Ray Charles, The Eagles, Barry Manilow, David Blaine, and Barbra Streisand. Now, from ABC 2000 headquarters at Times Square in New York, Peter Jennings.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to our Millennium coverage. This is normally the time when World News Tonight goes out to much of the country, but as far as the people here are concerned, and in fact in most of the world, There's only one great story today. What's right with the world as the century ends and the new one begins. And of course, what has been left undone in this century to still be accomplished in the next century. So if you're just joining us, coming home from somewhere, we'll try to bring you up to date with some of the other news. There's been an enormous amount of pageantry in the world, but there have been no Y2K problems that we are aware of. But as that was one of the stories about which people were so concerned at the beginning of the day, I want to make two quick checks. Let's go first to New Zealand, where ABC's James Walker has had an extraordinarily long day. It's now light again, Jimmy. And Jimmy's been worrying about all of the technological potential in Asia today. What's happened and what hasn't happened?
Peter, it's 12:30 p.m., afternoon of January 1st, a gorgeous day, about 75 degrees, and so far, here in New Zealand, not one single major, or for that matter, that we know of, minor Y2K problem. How much has the rest of the world been focused on New Zealand as the first industrial state to welcome the new year? Government officials say that the site recorded 4.7 million hits. Overall, a pretty darn good way to start the new century. Peter?
Thank you very much, Jimmy Walker. James Walker in New Zealand for us, who's been covering Y2K for the year. Sam Donaldson is at Y2K headquarters in Washington today, where Washington has been watching the world. What's going on, Sam?
Well, not so fast, Peter Jennings. We have a Y2K glitch to report. Confirmed in Delaware, the slot machines didn't work for a while at one of the racetracks, or some of them, because of a prospective 3-day look ahead. It's been fixed now, and you could lose your money at the Delaware racetracks. Other than that, nothing going on. And Americans seem to have taken this in stride, and they knew it all the time, Peter. No hoarding of food, no run on the gas stations, no extraordinary withdrawal of cash. In fact, the biggest point at this hour is that John Koskinen, who is the Y2K czar, is getting on an airplane right about now at National Airport to prove that you can fly safely. And we said to him, after all of these things that haven't happened, Mr. Koskinen, why not cancel the flight? I mean, politicians break their words all the time. They get elected president for having done so. He said I would do it. I will fly. So we'll report to you at some point this evening that he has landed safely, I trust.
But Sam, let me ask you some questions about Y2K and the rest of the world, because we'll check in with Lisa Stark at the FAA when this 7 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time becomes so important for airlines particularly. But so many people were worried about Russia, and they were particularly worried about the Ukraine. Did nothing happen untoward at all?
Well, not that we know of. Obviously, reporting can be delayed. And obviously also, Peter, some of these systems can take a while, perhaps even days, to degrade. As was explained here, all right, the lights don't go out immediately, but monitoring systems that help those lights stay on may fail, and therefore, after a period of time, they may go down. But at the moment, everything looks fine in Ukraine, as far as we know. All of those 21 Soviet-built power plants, for instance, seem to have come through okay. There was some concern about that. And the grid seemed to be all right. It's just one of those wonderful exercises where those of us here poised to report disaster are denied that wonderful opportunity, and I couldn't be more thankful.
Thank you very much, Sam. We'll come back to you a little later in the evening. Of course, there's been tremendous planning for Y2K throughout the world for the last couple of years, and there's still people all across America concerned tonight that that little piece of equipment somewhere is going to go wrong. I don't mean to hype it at all, but it's going to go wrong and cause somebody misery in their life, so we'll continue to stay on it. One of the big changes, of course, of today was in Russia, where Boris Yeltsin, the president, announced very early this morning he'd had enough. He was going to give up his job to Vladimir Putin, who has been the acting president for much of the day, now going to be the permanent president in all likelihood. And let us go to Washington and ask ABC's John McWethy, our national security correspondent, what's the official, both political and military reaction to Mr. Putin's arrival on the scene in such a major way, John?
Peter, I think the U.S. government at this point is not all that upset that Vladimir Putin has now stepped into the important job in Russia. As you and everyone is very much aware, Boris Yeltsin had not been much of a firm-hand governor for a number of months. American officials had been concerned by the drift in Russia. They feel that Vladimir Putin may well be the man to reestablish some of the law and order that is needed in Russia. He has said publicly that he is willing to pursue the democratic ideals that Boris Yeltsin was for. So thus far, they are not all that upset that there's a new president
Though
in Russia.
beyond being a law and order man, we don't know much about him, do we? We know something about his history, but we don't know where he wants to take the country.
Well, he has said publicly in his various conversations with American officials that he does want to pursue many of the same free market ideas that Boris Yeltsin did. One of the things that does concern officials is his very hard line on Chechnya, which, of course, the United States has been very critical of. Okay, John, thanks very much. John McWethy at the Pentagon. One of the fascinating moments for us today was we went out to North American Air Defense Command headquarters, or to their Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado headquarters, and we were just about to listen to a briefing, and they saw some missile launches. It was John McWethy who explained that those are missiles being used in a short-range way as that rather vicious war, as that very vicious war continues in Chechnya tonight. And the good news from the Indian subcontinent today, as Lynn Sher reported from Bombay earlier, is that the hijackers who had taken that plane, the Air India plane, 8 days ago, abandoned the plane in Afghanistan this morning. These are some of the passengers arriving back in India tonight in exchange for the release of 3 Muslim militants who'd been in Indian prisons for quite some time. And in Afghanistan, the Taliban government gave the hijackers only 10 hours to leave the country or be arrested. The U.S. is urging they be brought to justice, but we haven't heard much in the last several hours, and the 10 hours have certainly expired. Back in this hemisphere, after nearly a century of ownership, the United States today officially handed over the Panama Canal to the Panamanians themselves. There was quite a moving ceremony in Panama itself. President Carter was there today. President Clinton and the Secretary of State decided not to go. And on Wall Street today, which we saw when Muhammad Ali sounded the bell to open the day, they ended this year with absolutely record highs for the Dow and the NASDAQ. For the year, the Dow is up 25%. The NASDAQ is up an extraordinary 85%. And finally, from here in the news, with all of the new births we have been reporting, we're sad to report, and many of his friends and admirers around the country are sad to hear of the death of Elliot Richardson, former Secretary of Defense, a former Attorney General in the Nixon administration in 1973. He resigned. Students of Watergate certainly remember, rather than obey President Nixon's command to fire the Watergate Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. Mr. Richardson was 79.